The big metal doors of the training center opened with a loud hiss. Steam came out as cold air from space mixed with the warm air inside. Marcus Chen walked through the doors and stopped. His mouth fell open as he looked around. The room was huge. It was bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling was so high he could not see the top. Strange lights floated in the air without any wires. They gave off a soft blue glow that made everything look like it was underwater. But it was not the room that made Marcus stare. It was the other soldiers. A creature that looked like a giant bug stood near the wall. It was 8 feet tall and covered in hard black shell-like armor. It had 4 arms and 6 legs. Its head turned toward Marcus, and he saw it had huge compound eyes like a fly. The eyes were made of thousands of tiny parts that all looked at him at once. Next to the bug creature was something that looked like it was made of living crystal. It was see-through but also sparkled with many colors. When it moved, it made a sound like wind chimes. Light seemed to come from inside its body and dance around like trapped lightning. In the corner, Marcus saw what looked like a giant snake. But this snake was as thick as a tree trunk and had arms. Its skin was covered in green and gold scales that moved and shifted colors. The snake creature was coiled up, but Marcus could tell it was very long, maybe 30 feet or more. There were other things too. Some floated in the air inside metal suits. Marcus could not see what was inside the suits, but he could hear strange buzzing sounds coming from them. Other creatures looked almost normal, except they had too many arms or legs or heads. All of them were looking at him. Marcus was 6 feet tall and thought he was in good shape. He worked out at the gym back home and could run 5 miles without stopping. But standing in this room full of alien soldiers, he felt very small and very weak. One of the bug creatures made a sound like clicking and hissing. Other creatures started making noises too. Marcus did not understand their languages, but he knew they were talking about him. Some of the sounds seemed like laughing. A voice spoke in English from speakers in the ceiling. "Recruit Chen, Marcus. Report to Commander Zexhai for processing." Marcus looked around and saw the biggest bug creature pointing at him with one of its 4 arms. He walked over, trying not to look scared. His boots made loud sounds on the metal floor. The other creatures got quiet and watched him walk. When he got close to the commander, Marcus looked up. The alien was much taller than he first thought, maybe 9 feet tall. Its shell was not just black, but had dark blue and purple colors that moved across the surface like oil on water. "I am Commander Zexhai," the creature said in English. Its voice was strange, like it was coming from inside a metal box. "You are the human recruit?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said. He tried to stand up straight like a soldier. "Humans," Commander Zexhai said. The word sounded like he was saying something dirty. "Your species has only been in space for what? 200 of your years? And you think you can be soldiers in the Galactic Defense Corps?" Marcus did not know what to say. He had dreamed of joining the space military since he was a kid. When Earth finally got invited to send recruits to the Galactic training program, Marcus was one of the first to sign up. His test scores were high and he passed all the physical exams, but now, standing here, he was starting to think maybe he had made a mistake. "Do you know how long my people have been warriors?" the commander asked. "No, sir. 50,000 years. We have fought in more battles than your species has words. We have weapons that can destroy planets. We have armor that can stop the heat of a star." The commander leaned down so his face was close to Marcus. "What do humans have?" Marcus thought about it. "We have hearts, sir. We don't give up." The sound that came from the commander might have been laughing. It sounded like metal grinding against metal. Other creatures in the room started making their own laughing sounds. "Heart," the commander repeated. "How touching. Let me explain something to you, human. This is not your little Earth army where you fight other humans with simple weapons. This is real war. We fight creatures that can survive in the vacuum of space. We fight machines that think faster than any biological brain. We fight things that exist in dimensions your science has not even discovered yet." Marcus felt his face get red, but he did not say anything. "You will be assigned to Squad 7, the commander continued. "Try not to die on the first day. It makes paperwork difficult." A snake creature slithered over. This one was smaller than the one Marcus saw before, but still much bigger than any snake on Earth. It had arms and was wearing what looked like a military uniform made for its long body. "I am Sergeant Kreltos," the snake said. Its voice was like air leaking from a tire. "I will be your training sergeant. Follow me and try to keep up." As they walked across the room, Marcus heard more sounds from the other recruits. He was pretty sure they were making fun of him. The crystal creature made a sound like breaking glass that might have been laughing. The floating things in metal suits buzzed louder. Sergeant Kreltos led him to a wall covered with weapons. There were guns that looked like they were made of light. There were swords that seemed to cut through the air itself. There were things Marcus could not even guess what they were for. "These are standard issue weapons," the sergeant said. "Pick up that plasma rifle." Marcus reached for a gun that was glowing blue. As soon as he touched it, he almost dropped it. The thing was incredibly heavy. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds, but it looked like it should be light. "Having trouble?" the sergeant asked. Marcus could tell he was being sarcastic. "It's heavier than I expected," Marcus said, trying to lift the gun with both hands. "That is a child's training weapon," the sergeant said. "The real ones are much heavier." Marcus managed to get the gun up to his shoulder, but his arms were already shaking. He had lifted weights that were heavier than this, but somehow this gun felt different. It was like it was fighting him. "The weapon has artificial gravity built in," the sergeant explained. "It adjusts its weight based on the user's strength. The weaker you are, the heavier it gets. It is designed to push you to your limits." Marcus's arms gave out and he had to set the gun down. Around the room, he heard more of that alien laughing. "Perhaps you should try something more your speed," the sergeant said. He pointed to a corner where there were simple metal clubs and knives. "Those are weapons for primitive species." Marcus felt angry, but he tried not to show it. He had been trained by the best soldiers on Earth. He had learned how to fight with every weapon the human military had. But here, surrounded by creatures that could probably tear him apart with their bare hands, he felt like a child playing soldier. "Tomorrow your real training begins," Sergeant Kreltos said. "Get some sleep. You will need it." As Marcus walked to his assigned sleeping area, he heard the sounds of the alien recruits talking and laughing behind him. He did not need to understand their languages to know what they were saying. The human was weak. The human did not belong here. The human would never make it as a real soldier. Marcus lay down on his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Maybe they were right. Maybe humans really were not ready for this. Maybe he should just give up and go home. But something inside him refused to quit. His whole life, people had told him he was not good enough or strong enough or smart enough. He had proved them wrong every time. Maybe these aliens were stronger and faster and had better weapons. But Marcus had something they might not have. He had the stubborn refusal to give up that had gotten humans from caves to the stars. 3 weeks passed like a nightmare for Marcus. Every day brought new training and new ways for him to fail. When they practiced shooting, his plasma rifle was too heavy, and he could barely hit the targets. When they did combat training, the alien recruits threw him around like he was made of paper. When they increased the gravity to test their strength, Marcus fell to his knees while the others kept walking normally. The worst part was the laughing. Every time Marcus struggled with something, the other recruits made their alien sounds of amusement. The bug creatures clicked and hissed. The crystal beings chimed like broken bells. The snake people made sounds like air leaking from tires. Even the floating gas creatures in their metal suits buzzed in ways that sounded like mockery. Marcus tried to ignore it. He told himself that humans were new to space and it would take time to catch up. But it was hard to stay positive when every single day proved how weak and useless he was compared to the other species. On the 21st day, something different happened. Instead of regular training, Sergeant Kreltos told all the recruits to follow him to a special part of the base. "Today you will see the Hall of Legendary Weapons," the Snake Sergeant announced as they walked down a long corridor. "This is a great honor. Most recruits do not get to visit the hall until they graduate." The corridor was different from the rest of the base. The walls were made of some kind of dark stone instead of metal. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, and they seemed to glow with their own light. The air felt heavy and old, like they were walking into a tomb. At the end of the corridor was a massive door. It was twice as tall as Commander HFY and covered in more of the glowing symbols. When Sergeant Kreltos touched a panel next to the door, it split down the middle and opened without making any sound. Marcus gasped when he saw what was inside. The room was enormous and shaped like a circle. The ceiling was a dome that showed the stars outside, but somehow Marcus could tell these were not the real stars. These stars moved and danced in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. But it was not the ceiling that made Marcus stare. It was the weapons. Hundreds of weapons lined the walls of the circular room. Each one sat on its own platform with lights shining on it. Marcus saw swords that seemed to be made of pure fire. He saw guns that looked like they were carved from single pieces of crystal. There were hammers that crackled with lightning and spears that seemed to bend space around them. Some of the weapons were floating in the air, turning slowly while energy danced around them. Others were inside glass cases with warning symbols that Marcus could not read but somehow understood meant danger. These are the legendary weapons of the galaxy, Commander HFY said as he joined the group. His voice was different here, quieter and more respectful. Each one belonged to a great warrior from history. Some of these weapons are older than your sun, human. The commander walked to the first display. Inside was a sword that looked like it was made of liquid metal. This belonged to War Master Theclon of the Hegemony. He used it to cut through the armor of a living moon creature that was attacking his homeworld. He moved to the next display. This one held what looked like a simple wooden stick, but the air around it shimmered like heat waves. The Staff of Winds, used by the Stormcallers of Altair 7 to control the weather of entire planets. Marcus and the other recruits followed the commander around the room as he told them about weapon after weapon. Each story was more amazing than the last. Warriors who fought space dragons, soldiers who held off invasions from other dimensions, heroes who saved entire star systems with nothing but their legendary weapons. But Marcus noticed that as they walked around the room, they kept avoiding the center. In the middle of the circular hall was a simple stone platform. On top of the platform was something that looked very ordinary compared to all the other weapons. It was just a sword, not even a very fancy sword. The blade was made of plain metal and looked old. The handle was wrapped in what might have been leather but was so old it was hard to tell. There were no lights shining on it, no energy fields around it, no glass case protecting it. It just sat there on the stone platform like someone had forgotten about it. Finally, one of the crystal recruits made a sound like wind chimes and pointed at the center platform. Commander HFY stopped talking and looked where the crystal being was pointing. "Ah," the commander said. "You noticed Morden's blade." The way he said the name made all the recruits get quiet. Even the floating gas creatures stopped their buzzing. "What's special about it?" asked one of the bug creatures. "It looks like scrap metal." "That," Commander HFY said slowly, "is exactly what makes it so dangerous." The commander walked to the center platform, but stopped several feet away from it. 5,000 years ago, there was a species called the HFY. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest. They did not have the best technology, but they had something that made them very dangerous. "What?" asked the crystal being. "They refused to give up. Ever. No matter how hopeless things seemed, no matter how badly they were losing, the HFY would keep fighting until they won, or until they were all dead." Marcus found himself stepping closer to hear better. Something about this story felt important. The greatest of the HFY warriors was named Mordun, the commander continued. He was not the biggest or the strongest of his people, but he had their stubborn spirit more than any other. When the Void Swarm came through the dimensional gates to invade our galaxy, it was Morden who stood against them. "What is the Void Swarm?" asked one of the snake recruits. "Creatures from outside our reality," the commander said. His voice got very quiet. "Things that should not exist. They came through a gateway called the Nexus Gate in waves of billions. Every species in the galaxy sent their best warriors to fight them, but we were losing badly." Marcus looked at the simple sword on the platform. It was hard to believe that something so ordinary had been part of such an important battle. The retreat was called. Commander HFY continued. All the surviving forces were ordered to fall back and prepare for a final stand at the galactic core. But someone had to stay behind to hold the Nexus gate long enough for the evacuation to complete. "Let me guess," said the crystal being. Morden volunteered. Morden did not volunteer, the commander corrected. His entire species volunteered. But the gateway was only wide enough for one warrior to hold, so Morden took this blade and told his people to go help with the evacuation. He would handle the gateway alone. The room was completely silent now. Even Marcus had stopped breathing as he listened. For 7 days and 7 nights Morden stood at the Nexus gate, the commander said. Billions of void swarm creatures poured through the dimensional rift. They came in waves that never stopped. Creatures the size of buildings. Creatures that could phase through solid matter. Creatures that fed on fear itself. "And he fought them all?" asked Marcus. It was the first time he had spoken during the tour. "He did more than fight them," the commander said. "He won." When the evacuation was complete and reinforcements finally arrived at the gateway, they found Morden still standing. He was surrounded by a mountain of dead void creatures that reached almost to the ceiling of the gateway chamber. The blade in his hands was still glowing with power. "What happened to him?" asked the bug recruit. "He died standing up," the commander said simply. The effort of channeling that much power through the blade had burned him out from the inside, but he had saved the galaxy. Marcus stared at the weapon. It looked so normal, so simple, just a piece of metal with a handle. But according to the story, it had somehow given one warrior the power to fight billions of monsters. "The blade has been tested many times since then," the commander continued. "Every species has sent their greatest warriors to try to lift it from the platform. None have succeeded. The weapon seems to be waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" asked the crystal recruit. "No one knows. Some say it is waiting for another invasion like the Void Swarm. Others say it is waiting for someone worthy of Morden's legacy. But until that day comes, it sits here as a reminder of what one warrior can accomplish when they refuse to give up." The tour continued after that, but Marcus barely paid attention to the other weapons. His eyes kept going back to Morden's blade. There was something about it that called to him. Maybe it was because Morden sounded like the kind of person Marcus wanted to be. Someone who would not quit no matter how bad things got. As they were leaving the hall, Marcus heard some of the alien recruits talking about the blade. "I bet I could lift it," said one of the bug creatures. "My people are much stronger than those ancient Ketharai." "Strength is not the issue," said a snake recruit. "It must be about worthiness. My species has the most military honors in galactic history." "Maybe it needs someone with high intelligence," suggested the crystal being. "My people have the highest brain-to-body ratio in known space." Marcus listened to them argue about who was most qualified to try lifting the blade. None of them seemed to think a human would even be worth considering. And maybe they were right. Marcus had failed at everything else since coming here. Why would an ancient legendary weapon be any different? The idea started as a joke during dinner in the mess hall. Marcus was sitting alone at a table in the corner, eating the bland food that the base computer said was safe for human biology. The alien recruits sat together at the larger tables, making their various sounds of conversation. Marcus tried not to listen, but their voices carried across the room. They were still talking about the legendary weapons they had seen that day. Each species was convinced that one of their own would be able to lift Morden's blade if they were allowed to try. "The human has been very quiet since the tour," said one of the snake recruits loud enough for Marcus to hear. Perhaps seeing real weapons made him realize how hopeless his situation is. The bug creatures clicked, and what Marcus had learned was their way of laughing. "Maybe we should let him try to lift the blade. It would be amusing to watch him fail at something else." "Yes," hissed Sergeant Kreltos from the instructor's table. "The little mammal thinks he can be a soldier. Let him try to lift a weapon that real warriors cannot move." Marcus kept eating and tried to ignore them. He had gotten good at ignoring the mockery over the past 3 weeks, but something about their tone tonight was different. Meaner. Like they were trying to hurt him on purpose instead of just having fun. "I heard that humans believe they are special," said one of the crystal beings. The sound it made was like breaking glass. "They think they are destined for greatness because they climbed out of mud and reached for the stars." How touching, said another alien voice. They have delusions of grandeur. Marcus put down his fork. He was not angry exactly, but he was tired. Tired of being the weakest recruit, tired of failing at everything, tired of being treated like he did not belong here. He stood up and walked over to the alien tables. The conversation stopped when they saw him coming. "You want me to try lifting the blade?" Marcus asked. His voice was calm and quiet. Sergeant Kreltos slithered closer, his scales shining under the mess hall lights. "Oh, the human speaks. Yes, little mammal, we think you should try. It will be educational for you." "Educational how? It will teach you the difference between legend and reality," said one of the bug creatures. "Real warriors and pretend ones." Marcus looked around at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked amused. Others looked curious about what he would do. A few looked like they felt sorry for him. "Fine," Marcus said. "I'll try." The mess hall erupted in sounds of alien excitement. Word spread quickly through the base that the human recruit was going to attempt to lift Morden's blade. Within an hour, it seemed like every being on the base knew about the challenge. Sergeant Kreltos led a group of recruits back to the hall of legendary weapons. He had to get special permission from Commander Zexhai to open the hall after hours. The commander agreed to come watch, probably because he wanted to see Marcus fail as much as everyone else did. The hall felt different. At night, the dancing stars on the ceiling seemed brighter, and the weapons around the walls cast strange shadows. But the center platform was exactly the same. Morden's blade sat there, looking like a piece of old metal that someone had forgotten about. Marcus walked slowly toward the platform while dozens of alien beings followed behind him. Their various forms of breathing and moving filled the hall with strange sounds. He could hear them making bets about how long he would strain before giving up. "This should be quick," said one of the crystal recruits. "Humans have no real strength." "Give him 30 seconds before he admits defeat," said a bug creature. 20 seconds, said another voice. Marcus reached the platform and looked down at the blade. Up close, it looked even more ordinary than before. The metal was dark and pitted with age. The leather wrapping on the handle was cracked and worn. There was nothing special about it at all, except for the story. Marcus thought about Morden standing alone at the Nexus gate while billions of monsters poured through. A warrior who was not the biggest or strongest but who refused to give up. Someone who found a way to win when winning seemed impossible. Marcus bent down and wrapped both hands around the handle of the blade. The metal felt cold against his palms. He could feel the rough texture of the old leather wrapping. The weapon was heavier than it looked, but not impossibly heavy, maybe 20 or 30 pounds. He pulled upward with all his strength. Nothing happened. The blade did not move even a tiny bit. It felt like it was welded to the stone platform. Marcus pulled harder, putting his back into it and lifting with his legs like he had been taught when moving heavy things. Still nothing. Behind him, the alien recruits started making their sounds of amusement. The bug creatures clicked faster. The crystal beings chimed like broken bells. The snake people hissed with satisfaction. "Having trouble, human?" called out Sergeant Kreltos. "Perhaps you should try using both hands." "I am using both hands," Marcus said through gritted teeth. He was pulling as hard as he could, but the blade would not budge. "Try harder," suggested one of the bug recruits. "Maybe you are just not strong enough." Marcus braced his feet against the platform and pulled until his arms hurt. His face turned red from the effort and sweat started running down his forehead. But the blade remained exactly where it was. The laughter got louder. Some of the aliens started making comments about human weakness and how foolish it was for Earth to think they could join the galactic military. Marcus let go of the blade and stepped back, breathing heavily. He felt the familiar sting of failure wash over him. Once again, he had proven that humans were not good enough. But then, something else started to grow inside him. Not just personal frustration, but something bigger. Something that had been building, up for 3 weeks of constant failure and mockery. He was not just Marcus Chen failing again. He was humanity itself being laughed at by an entire galaxy of species who thought they were better. Every human who had ever been told they were not good enough. Every person who had been looked down on for being different or weak. Marcus thought about Earth, so far away from this place. He thought about all the humans back home who would never know that their species was being judged and found wanting by aliens who had never bothered to understand what humans really were. He thought about every human who had ever faced impossible odds and found a way to win anyway. The people who had climbed mountains just to see what was on the other side. The ones who had sailed across oceans without knowing what they would find. The scientists who had looked at the stars and figured out how to reach them. Marcus stepped forward and grabbed the blade again. This time something was different. The metal felt warm instead of cold. There was a tingling sensation in his hands like a small electric current running through the weapon. He pulled again, and this time the blade moved. Just a little bit, maybe an inch. But it definitely moved. The laughter behind him stopped abruptly. Marcus adjusted his grip and pulled harder. The blade rose another few inches off the platform. The tingling sensation was getting stronger and starting to spread up his arms. "That is impossible," whispered Commander Zexhai. Marcus did not hear him. All of his attention was focused on the weapon in his hands. It was still heavy, but it felt different now. Like it wanted to be lifted. Like it was waking up after a long sleep. He pulled again, and this time the blade came free of the platform, completely. The hall filled with gasps and sounds of shock from the alien recruits. Several of them stepped backward as if they were afraid. Marcus stood holding Morden's blade above his head. The weapon was starting to glow with a faint light that seemed to come from inside the metal itself. The tingling sensation had spread through his whole body, and he felt stronger than he ever had before. For a moment, the hall was completely silent, except for the sound of Marcus breathing. Then one of the crystal beings made a sound like shattering glass and said, "How is this possible? He is just a human." Marcus looked around at all the alien faces staring at him in shock and confusion. For 3 weeks they had treated him like he was nothing, like humans were too weak and primitive to matter. "Maybe," Marcus said quietly, "you do not know as much about humans as you think you do." The blade in his hands grew brighter, and Marcus felt power flowing through him like electricity. He was still the same person he had been 5 minutes ago, but somehow he was also more. Like the weapon was showing him what he could become if he stopped holding back. He looked at Sergeant Kreltos, whose snake mouth was hanging open in shock. "Still think this will be educational?" Marcus asked. For the first time since he had arrived, at the base nobody was laughing at the human recruit. The glow from the blade started small, like the light from a flashlight with dying batteries. But it was growing brighter. The light spread from the metal into Marcus's hands, and then up his arms, like liquid fire. Marcus felt the power flowing through him, and it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was not just strength, though he could feel his muscles getting stronger. It was not just energy, though electricity seemed to dance under his skin. It was something deeper. Something that made him feel more human than he had ever felt before. The alien recruits were backing away from him now. The bug creature's compound eyes were wide with what looked like fear. The crystal beings were making high-pitched sounds like wind through broken windows. Even Sergeant Kreltos had uncoiled his massive body and was slithering backward toward the wall. "Put the weapon down, human," Commander Zexhai said. His voice was trying to sound commanding, but Marcus could hear the uncertainty in it. "You do not understand what you are dealing with." Marcus looked at the commander and smiled. When he spoke, his voice sounded different, deeper, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "You want to understand what I'm dealing with?" Marcus asked. "Let me tell you about humans." The blade was changing in his hands. The simple metal was shifting and growing, becoming something that hurt to look at directly. It was still a sword, but also somehow more than a sword. Like it existed in more dimensions than the normal 3. Energy crackled along the edges of the blade. But it was not the clean, controlled energy of the advanced alien weapons Marcus had seen. This was something wild and chaotic, something that felt alive and angry and ready to burn the galaxy down if necessary. "We are the species that looked at fire and said we owned it," Marcus continued. The words seemed to come from somewhere deep, inside him, like he was remembering things instead of thinking them. We are the species that looked at the ocean and decided we belonged there too. We looked at the sky and claimed it. We looked at space and said that was ours as well. Several of the floating gas creatures in their metal suits were retreating toward the exit. Their suits were making warning sounds like alarms going off. Whatever sensors they had were telling them that something very dangerous was happening. Every other species in this galaxy learned to be comfortable, Marcus said. The blade was humming now with power that made the air itself vibrate. You grew strong and then you stopped growing. You reached your peaks and decided that was good. Enough. Commander HFY was pressing buttons on a device attached to his arm. Marcus could see numbers flashing on a small screen. The commander's compound eyes grew wider as he read the display. But humans have never been comfortable, Marcus continued. We have never been satisfied. We are the species that looks at impossible and calls it Tuesday afternoon. One of the crystal beings made a sound like a scream and shattered into 1,000 pieces. But instead of falling to the ground, the pieces reformed into the same creature a few feet further away. Marcus realized it had teleported itself across the room to get away from him. The energy readings are impossible, Commander HFY whispered to Sergeant Kreltos. He is producing more power than a small star. How is this happening? The sergeant hissed back. He is just a human. They are barely above animals. Marcus heard them talking and the smile on his face got wider. It was not a nice smile anymore. It was the smile of a predator that had been playing with its food and was getting ready to eat. Just animals? Marcus repeated. You really do not understand what humans are, do you? The weapons around the walls of the hall started to react to the energy coming from Morden's blade. Some of them began to glow. Others started humming or vibrating. A few actually lifted off their platforms and floated in the air like they were trying to get closer to Marcus. Let me explain something to you, Marcus said. His voice was getting louder but also stranger, like multiple people were talking at the same time. Every few million years we get bored, or we get curious, or we decide it would be fun to start over and see what happens. Commander HFY's device was beeping frantically now. Warning lights were flashing red all over the display. So we find a nice quiet planet somewhere, Marcus continued. We dial back our evolution. We make ourselves smaller and weaker and more limited. We become the kind of species that other civilizations can understand and feel safe around. Some of the alien recruits were running for the exit now. The ones that remained looked frozen with terror, like small animals staring at a forest fire. We play the game of civilization, Marcus said. We let other species develop their cultures and technologies. We watch how galactic communities grow and change. We observe and we learn and we try to be good neighbors. The blade in his hands was beyond description now. It looked like it was made of solid lightning wrapped in shadow. Reality seemed to bend around it like space itself was trying to get out of the way. But eventually we get tired of the game, or someone threatens us, or someone makes us angry. Marcus looked directly at Sergeant Kreltos. Usually it is the laughter that does it. The sergeant tried to slither further away, but his back was already against the wall. What are you? He whispered. We are what you get when you take a species that evolved on a death world and give them enough time to figure out how the universe really works, Marcus said. We are what happens when you underestimate the people who turned hunting mammoths into landing on moons in 12,000 years. Commander HFY was frantically pressing more buttons on his device. I am calling for evacuation, he said to the remaining recruits. Everyone out of the hall immediately. No one is leaving, Marcus said calmly. The exits to the hall suddenly sealed themselves with loud metallic clangs. Not until we finish our conversation. The power radiating from Marcus was making the air shimmer like heat waves. The ancient weapons around the walls were all glowing now, responding to energy signatures they had not felt for thousands of years. Do you know what the HFY were? Marcus asked the terrified aliens. Do you know why Morden was able to stand alone against billions of enemies? Nobody answered. They were all too scared to speak. The HFY were us, Marcus said. 5,000 years ago we were playing at being a normal galactic species, We had made ourselves look different, and we had hidden our true capabilities. But when the Void Swarm threatened the galaxy, one of us decided it was time to stop pretending. Commander Zexhai made a sound like choking. That is impossible. The Kethari went extinct. No, Marcus said. We got bored with that form and moved on. We always move on. We seed ourselves across the galaxy and start over with new shapes and new limitations. We have been doing it for longer than your species has existed. The blade was singing now, a sound like the birth of stars mixed with the death of worlds. The other weapons in the hall were joining in, creating a harmony that seemed to shake the foundations of reality. Sometimes we are the wise ancient species that guides younger civilizations. Sometimes we are the mysterious aliens that appear and disappear without explanation. Sometimes we are the primitive species that everyone underestimates. Marcus looked around at the cowering aliens. This time we decided to be humans. Sergeant Kreltos was pressed flat against the wall now, his scales pale with terror. What do you want from us? Marcus considered the question. The power flowing through him was intoxicating. He could feel the weapons of a dozen extinct civilizations calling to him. He could sense the hidden human colonies scattered across the galaxy, all of them waiting for the signal to reveal themselves. He could reshape this galaxy in an afternoon if he wanted to. Right now, Marcus said, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that the weak can become strong, that the underestimated can reshape reality when they get tired of being mocked. The energy around Marcus pulsed like a heartbeat. Every alien in the room felt it in their bones. The next time you see a human, Marcus continued, remember that you have no idea what they really are. Remember that patience is not the same thing as weakness. Remember that when humans smile and nod and pretend to be harmless, it might be because we choose to be harmless. He looked directly at Commander Zexhai. For now, the power radiating from Marcus was making the ancient weapons around the hall vibrate and glow. Some of them were floating off their platforms, drawn to the energy like metal to a magnet. The air itself seemed to be bending around him, creating strange visual effects that hurt to look at directly. Commander Zexhai's device was screaming warnings now. The numbers on the screen were climbing so fast they looked like a blur. Impossible, the commander whispered. The energy output is equivalent to a stellar core. No biological being can channel that much power. No normal biological being, Marcus corrected. His voice had taken on harmonics that should not have been possible from a human throat. When he spoke, it sounded like multiple people talking in perfect unison. But then again, normal is relative. The blade in his hands had become something beyond physical description. It existed in the normal 3 dimensions, but also seemed to stretch into spaces that the alien minds could not comprehend. Looking at it was like trying to understand infinity while staring into the heart of a star. You want to know the real joke? Marcus asked the cowering aliens. All those stories about legendary weapons and ancient heroes? Most of them were us. The great warriors of galactic history? Humans playing dress-up in alien bodies. Sergeant Kreltos was making a sound like air leaking from a punctured tire. The War Master Theclon who killed the moon creature, he whispered. The storm callers of Altair 7 who controlled the weather. They were all human, Marcus finished. We get bored easily. Sometimes we like to play hero. Sometimes we like to play villain. Sometimes we just like to see what happens when we push the boundaries of what civilizations think is possible. One of the crystal beings who had not yet fled made a sound like breaking glass. How long? How long have you been watching us? Marcus smiled, and in that expression was the patience of a species that had been playing cosmic games since before. Most of the galaxy's current civilizations had learned to make fire. Since the beginning, he said simply. We were here when the first species developed space travel. We were here when the Galactic Council was formed. We guided some civilizations toward peace and pushed others toward war, just to see what would happen. The sealed doors of the hall suddenly opened with a loud hiss, but instead of alien security forces rushing in, nothing happened. The corridor beyond was empty and dark. Your security teams are not coming, Marcus said, noticing their confused looks. I sent them away. This conversation is not for them. Commander Zexhai tried to back away further, but there was nowhere to go. What do you want from us? What is the purpose of this game? Marcus considered the question while absently swinging the reality-bending weapon in patterns that left glowing trails in the air. Each movement seemed to tear small holes in space itself, though they sealed themselves almost immediately. Entertainment mostly, he said. Do you have any idea how boring it gets when you can reshape matter with your thoughts? When you can travel between dimensions? When you understand the fundamental forces that hold reality together? The remaining alien recruits huddled together like frightened children. The bug creatures had stopped clicking entirely. The crystal beings were dim and colorless with fear. Even the floating gas creatures had turned off most of their suit systems to avoid drawing attention. So we play, Marcus continued. We pretend to be weak. We let ourselves be laughed at and dismissed. We fail at simple tasks and struggle with basic weapons. And we wait to see how long it takes before someone pushes us too far. And then what? Asked one of the crystal beings in a voice like whispered wind. And then we remind the galaxy who we really are, Marcus said. The blade pulsed with energy that made the walls of the hall tremble. Just like we did 5,000 years ago when the Void Swarm came. Just like we have done a dozen times throughout galactic history when things got out of hand. Sergeant Kreltos found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a hiss. Are you going to kill us? Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the question. Kill you? Why would I do that? You have not done anything worthy of death. You laughed at me. You called me weak. You treated me like I was less than you. He shrugged, a very human gesture that looked strange coming from someone radiating cosmic power. That is just being rude, not evil. Then what happens now? Commander Zexhai asked. Marcus walked back to the stone platform in the center of the hall. With a casual motion, he placed Mordune's blade back where it had rested for thousands of years. The moment the weapon touched the stone, it returned to its simple, ordinary appearance. Just an old metal sword with a worn leather handle. The transformation in Marcus was equally dramatic. The energy flowing around him faded away. The strange harmonics left his voice. The reality-bending effects stopped. Within seconds, he looked like just another human recruit in an ill-fitting uniform. Now you go back to your training, Marcus said in his normal voice. You become soldiers in the Galactic Defense Corps. You protect the galaxy from real threats when they appear. And you? Asked Commander Zexhai. I think I will drop out of the program, Marcus said conversationally. It turns out I already know everything you were going to teach me. Thank you for the educational experience, though. He started walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back at the group of still terrified aliens. Oh, and one more thing, he said. The next human who shows up here for training, try to make them feel welcome. We really do prefer being friends rather than gods. It involves much less paperwork. Marcus walked out of the Hall of Legendary Weapons, leaving behind a room full of beings who would spend the rest of their lives wondering what other cosmic jokes they might have been the target of. Commander Zexhai stared at the simple blade sitting on its platform. It looked completely ordinary now, giving no hint of the power it had displayed just moments before. But he knew he would never look at it the same way again. Sir? Sergeant Kreltos said quietly. What do we do now? We file a report, the commander said after a long pause. Though I doubt anyone will believe it. What kind of report? Commander Zexhai thought about trying to explain what had just happened. How could he describe the truth about humans to a galactic council that thought they were a primitive species barely capable of space travel? Training accident, he said finally. Equipment malfunction, nothing more. But deep in the archives of the galactic government, certain very old files were quietly retrieved from storage that night. Files that had been classified at the highest levels for thousands of years. Files that contained warnings about a species that called itself human. Files that suggested this was not the first time something like this had happened. Marcus Chen returned to Earth on the next transport ship. He went back to his job as a high school history teacher in a small town where nothing exciting ever happened. His students never suspected that their mild-mannered teacher occasionally received personal messages from galactic emperors asking, politely, if Earth needed anything. They never knew that the stories he told about human determination and refusal to give up were far more literal than anyone realized. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, the true architects of galactic civilization continued their patient watch. They monitored the progress of younger species with the fond attention of parents watching children play. Most of the time, they were content to observe and guide from the shadows. But every so often, when someone forgot their manners or pushed too hard or laughed a little too loudly at the wrong moment, they would remind the galaxy of an important truth. Humans had been patient for a very long time, but patience was not the same thing as weakness, and it was definitely not the same thing as forgiveness. The legend of the human recruit spread quickly through the Galactic Defense Corps, though it changed with each telling. Some versions said he had destroyed the entire hall with his bare hands. Others claimed he had opened portals to other dimensions. A few insisted he had spoken directly to the gods themselves. But in the highest levels of galactic government, the truth was carefully recorded and locked away, along with a simple recommendation that would echo through official policy for generations to come. Do not make the humans angry. You would not like them when they are angry.